So I'll put aside the question of nuclear deterrence for right now, except to point out that nuclear weapons are always described as being for deterrence. In fact, one could define deterrence as whatever it is that nuclear weapons do. We even call our nuclear weapons deterrents, the sea-based deterrent and the land-based deterrent. And so we've completely lost track of what deterrence is actually like and how it works and what nuclear weapons are actually doing by sort of getting wrapped up in our own euphemisms. But if we're going to just have a true minimal deterrent mission, then we have to give up other missions, and we think that nuclear weapons are so remarkable, they're so unique, that the missions that they have must just sort of flow from the laws of physics. Okay? And we have to keep in mind that the majority of missions that nuclear weapons have had historically have gone away. There's a debate in this country about whether we should have a missile defense system or not. But nobody, as far as I can tell, is talking about making it a nuclear mission. But in the past, that was a nuclear mission. The Safeguard system had nuclear endo and exoatmospheric interceptors. Sea control was a nuclear mission. Anti-submarine warfare, anti-tank warfare. Air defense was a nuclear mission. I went to the University of Chicago between 1968 and 1972, and there were nuclear-armed 90 Hercules missile batteries at the end of 63rd Street on the lake there. It was an exciting time. So all these missions have gone away, okay? And not because of arms control, but because of conventional alternatives. So the language that we use, the euphemism, school us into thinking that they're restricted to deterrence, but there's more to that. This was not true during the Cold War, and it's not true today. The one mission that drives nuclear weapons is the day-to-day deployment, drives their day-to-day deployment, and also creates the so-called requirements for nuclear weapons, such as the yield, responsiveness, the reliability, flight times, accuracy. All of those things is the counterforce mission. That is the ability to attack and destroy ground enemy targets on the ground. And this means mainly, but not entirely, Russian nuclear weapons. And it's this ability to carry out a surprise, disarming first strike on short notice is the most demanding mission for nuclear weapons, and it sets the most stringent requirements for the arsenal. And one of the things that we're recommending is to specifically and explicitly to abandon this mission. So that's why I want to focus on that, because I think that this is going to be the hardest thing to sell politically. What we have now is that during some future crisis, perhaps even in a conventional war between the United States and Russia or some other nuclear power, we believe the Russians are about to use their central nuclear forces to somehow affect the outcome of the war, perhaps shock us into ending the war by attacking an American city. And the president now has the option of attacking first, to try to destroy as much of the Russian forces on the ground as possible, to reduce the damage that they could inflict on Americans. And what we're saying is that we should abandon that mission. So people are going to ask, how can that possibly make sense? How can you remove that option from the president? How can you unilaterally give up this capability to perhaps save millions of lives? And we do believe it makes sense for three reasons. First, the circumstances under which the president will use this capability will be extraordinarily unlikely. The consequences of even a blunted Russian nuclear attack will be by far the greatest disaster in American history. So the president will have a choice to make between the certainty of a nuclear war, and it'll be certain because he's going to start it, and the potential risk of being attacked first by the Russians. And we believe that the combination, on the one hand, of this very high confidence you have to have in military intelligence needed to know with certainty that the Russians are going to attack, and then on the other hand have no confidence whatsoever in the remaining diplomatic options, that combination will be so rare that the president is highly unlikely to ever use this capability. Well, yeah, but if they did use it, it might be advantageous. Even if it's rare, it might have some net expectation value of advantage. So we have to compare costs and benefits, and are there costs? And yes, there are costs. Every day we're running risks. The Russians and the Chinese know that their forces are vulnerable, so the Russians can try to counter this with tactical measures, such as launching on warning of U.S. attack, which substantially increases the likelihood of launching under a false alarm. They might also pre-delegate launch authority to lower levels of authority during a crisis. And it also, secondly, it affects their force structure. U.S. military and intelligence leaders have stated in congressional testimony that they believe that a major motivation for Chinese modernization and their moving to mobile systems is their sense of vulnerability from the U.S. first strike. If the Russians believe they need some X number of weapons to be an effective deterrent against the U.S., and remember, since we have submarines, Russians don't have any hope of executing a disarm first strike against us. They are forced by circumstances to some kind of deterrent strategy. So if they need to have X weapons, they judge X weapons to be effective for a deterrent, and they think of U.S. first strike will be, say, 90% effective, then they need to maintain 10 times X to have the deterrent force survive that they think needs. So every day, by maintaining this capability that we'll probably never use, we create new dangers that go on day by day, and now decade after decade. And finally, we believe that the negotiations, now that negotiations with the Russians are back on track, it'll be far easier to negotiate limits on Russian weapons if we give up the ability to destroy those weapons. If the Russians think they need X weapons as a deterrence force, and they have 10 times X because we're targeting them, then giving up on our ability to target those weapons will make it much easier to get a negotiated reduction of 9% in Russian weapons. And eventually, when the next tier, when we start moving into the second tier of nuclear powers with the Chinese and others. So while giving up on this attack capability, I think, will be the hardest sell politically. I think that opponents will claim that we're unilaterally disarming, we're making ourselves vulnerable when we don't need to leave. I think that we can answer these objections forcefully and move to a minimum deterrent doctrine that will make the United States and the rest of the world safer. And I think